hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the studio for episode 245 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday afternoon here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. I'm not going to talk about movies specifically. I'm not going to talk about fitness, working out, mindset, being an adult, or any of the usual topics that you might come across in this podcast. Many of you know that I am at heart a storyteller, a screenwriter who worked on the edges of the movie business for many years, had a number of projects that came oh so close, never came to fruition. Something always went wrong. But the need to tell stories, to try to make them as entertaining as possible without going overboard, it still exists. So I'm going to tell you a story, something that happened recently and was resolved in a very surprising way. So my dear old dad, Alan Philip Cohen, the C in SCF and Co., that mug is not there accidentally, the slightest, tiniest tribute that I can pay to the literally person most directly responsible for me being here in this space at this juncture, somebody who had my back. People said, maybe cut him loose, throw him into deep water, see if he learned how to swim yet. I don't know if I should do that. My dad passed almost 2 years ago. He had pretty good health for the first 76, 77 years of his life. And at a certain point in time, the light began to go out in his eyes, and his eyes were very bright. And I always imagined it was because he was quite intelligent, and he had a lot of colliding thoughts going through his head at any given time. And there are certain things that, for example, a parent can teach their child. Could be the birds and the bees. It could be how to change a flat tire. Or it could be basic upkeep with a car, and not just carburetor, solenoid, make sure you get an oil change, but such things as registration, inspection, and make sure you have it set up so that your insurance doesn't expire. Okay, it's not really that complicated. But alas, when you have the sort of tunnel vision that I do, the son of a CPA who had a level of tunnel vision that I do not even approach. My father could sit there all day at his desk and focus on the Strauss Trust, 1,000 pages of the Strauss Trust, or the Circer audit, whatever it might be. And he would focus on that. And other than personal needs breaks, every now and then he would go to the bathroom. He could do that for 8 straight hours. Anything else in his field, it was like a force field. I do have some of the same characteristics, and there are things that to other people would be obvious that to me, well, if you point it out to me, it's obvious. If you show me the error of my ways, then it becomes obvious. But it is not automatically obvious because of this. If it is not in this narrow range that I walk around with, well, it's not by accident. Then when I meet people, I describe myself as, depending on what we're doing, when we meet, what I might be up to. You're going to think one of two things. Wow, this guy is brilliant. This guy's so stupid, I can't believe he even has the intelligence to tie his shoes. I won't say the choice is yours, but that's what we're talking about. It's easy to miss things when everything is so narrow. So when my father passed, I drove his car. He had a really nice Lexus, a lot of miles, but when I tell you impeccably, immaculately maintained, I'm not exaggerating. There was one problem though with the car, and unfortunately the car it got smashed up. My dad's car accident was unfortunately the beginning of the end for him. He never recovered from it, but we got the car fixed, restored. There was nothing wrong with the engine. It just needed a lot of body work, and he was adamant. He said, I don't want you to get rid of this car, Jared. It means a lot to me. Okay. Hey, you ask, I do. Sometime in early 2023, I went to get an inspection, and the car didn't pass inspection. Okay, it's not that big a deal. I'll take it somewhere else. So I went through this process of going to different shops, in the hope that somebody could figure out a way to get the car to pass inspection. They didn't know why the check engine light kept going on, and why they really couldn't get it onto the machine. They couldn't figure out why the check engine light kept going on. So what ended up happening, when you have a car with a ton of miles, you're not going to sell it for that much money. And if you get information, for example, that says, we don't know exactly why this car won't pass inspection, why we can't even do it. It could be an electrical malfunction. Then a number of places say, we have a fix we think might solve the problem, but it's going to be $1,500, $2,000, $800. We have no idea if the car's going to pass inspection. And the actual operation of the automobile is fine. It doesn't burn gas any differently than it ever did. It still gets really good mileage for the class of car that it is. You know, the normal size, a luxury car, but a sedan, nothing crazy. It had not a turbocharged engine. It's not a performance car. This is a car for I hate to say it because I'm in the category, but this is a car for an older person. This is not a car. Now, with the number of miles it has, it would be a good car for a younger person because without it having that much value, it's safe, it's very comfortable, and if you bang it up, its book value is probably about $2,000 to $3,000 tops. That's great. You don't want to spend money on a fix when the car itself is not broken. There is nothing wrong with the operation of the car. It simply won't pass inspection because they can't get it on the machine. I heard this for 8 months. So the inspection expired. And every now and then, you Long Islanders know this, you could be driving in West Hampton, you could be in Massapequa, you could be in Greenlawn. You never know when there is going to be a dragnet of local police officers pulling people over, usually for a registration issue. But if they see an inspection issue, well, there you go. They're going to get you for that too. Well, you just got to bite the bullet. And if you get a ticket, tough shit. But the idea of spending $1,500, oops, Jer, sorry, we still can't get it on the machine. We thought this was going to do the trick. You get where I'm coming from. I wasn't going to get rid of the car because those cars were made to last and last. Car has another 50,000 miles as we speak. No doubt about it. So make a decision. No problem with registration. Registration's not the issue. If I get pulled over, they're going to probably give me a ticket for expired inspection and then pay a fine and go on with your life. Paying one fine a year is preferable to just throwing money at a problem when there is every chance, because the repair shops were giving me different potential fixes. Oh, it could be the O2 sensor. We don't think it's the O2 sensor. Another deal. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to go my own way, as they say. So last year, around this time, I did get pulled over, but I wasn't that upset. I got pulled over by one of the dragnets I just mentioned. I wasn't that upset about it because it was the day that I knew for 100% certain that I was going to be able to successfully sell my father's house and close on this house. And there were very, very tense, harrowing, honestly tense, terrifying weeks where I thought that I was going to blow the whole thing, that I was going to fuck up on both fronts and humiliate myself in front of the relatives who are no longer here, who would have been counting on me to not fuck this up. So there was a lot of negativity going on, and then I get this incredible news, it's going to work out. The buyer is ready, and we have a deal in place with Clark. You're going to close. Everybody's happy. We have a separate, whatever it was. So when I got pulled over that day, I wasn't that upset. Because, and the police officer, he was very nice, And he said, oh, your check engine light doesn't go off. Have you been to shops? And so we had a conversation for a couple of minutes, and he said, you know what, this is such a dumb ticket. I'm not supposed to say that, but there's nothing wrong with your car. I'm looking at it. I don't smell anything. I bet that the emissions are, so hey, we go back and forth for a couple of minutes. He says, I'm supposed to write you a ticket. Let me just write you a seatbelt ticket. You plead out. It's not even as serious of a theoretical violation as emissions. We just write you a seatbelt ticket. Okay. So he writes me a seatbelt ticket, go on with my day. And I had made appropriate payments. I had been getting snail mail from Geico regarding the insurance, all of this. Okay, now, I moved into this house early November. I took as much time as possible before moving in because I didn't want to pay a ton more than I needed to for the move because I didn't have that much stuff that had to come over. For example, I had about 600 or 700 pounds of home gym equipment. Now, we can do the math, okay? If that's the kind of thing that you go with in a move, that is going to be hundreds of dollars right there. I took every piece of gym equipment on my own in that car, that Lexus. I took things piece by piece. I was meticulous, just like my dad was the most meticulous planner. He actually had handwritten to-do lists until he retired in 2010, 2011. Even though he was computerized, he'd had a cell phone for a decade. He still wrote out the word to do at the top of pieces of yellow paper and would number a list. That is how meticulous he was. So in this instance, I wanted to show, yeah, I can be that way too. I'm going to do this the most intelligent way that I can conceive of, the most economical way, and lo and behold, that worked. But when you go through enormous amounts of stress, there are things that are going to pass by your theoretical, well, not even field of vision, but that are going to go unnoticed unless you're alerted to them. Unless you're alerted to them. And that's why we rely on things like random text messages, random emails, oh, my driver's license is up, whatever it might be. It's not something that would necessarily be in my head when there's 100 other things drawing my attention. So when I moved here and I got through it, I was a little sad because Dad's hope, his original plan, when we put pen to paper on this, his health was bad, but he hoped he had another decade, and he only had a couple of months. So yes, there was the sadness that he was not here, literally, figuratively, symbolically. Well, he'll always be here, symbolically. But it was not like, oh my God, this is the greatest day ever. It was a day of happiness. It was a day of feeling accomplished and knowing that my dad and his dad, who was an absolute home run hitter, Nathan Cohen, they would have been proud. That I did not buckle under pressure, that I did not turn around and run, but that I stayed and I continued to push forward when people were telling me, you've reached the end of the journey, Jared, it's time to turn it. Fuck you, no it's not. No, because neither my dad or his dad would have taken no for an answer, neither am I. There's a way through, I'm gonna find it. You can do whatever it is that you think you're doing, but I'm going to find a way through, and I did. So I could pat myself on the back a little through the sadness and the sense of, okay, we actually did something here. This looked like it was all gonna go wrong, and it ended up turning out okay. So one of the first things I did after making sure I canceled all of the appropriate bills, I had an apartment in Huntington Village, which I moved out of in March of 2023. And I temporarily moved into my father's house about 3/4 of a mile away. Many of you know this. Also in Huntington, but not the Village, closer to Huntington High School. For those who know this part of Long Island, he was in a development not far from the Big 8 shopping center. There's a Kmart now, there's a ShopRite, or Shop Wrong as my sister calls it. So when I did the mail transfer, most of the really important mails I was getting at my father's address. But I had an apartment and there were a lot of important mails that went there. And I didn't do the transfer for the apartment address, not far from Book Review and Paramount Theater. Again, if you're familiar with Huntington, I lived in that range. I had an apartment in a 130-year-old building and the floor was warped. Having a home gym was great, but trying to do deadlifts with a floor that was doing this, that was a challenge too. But I executed the mail forwarding correctly, and within 3 or 4 days, I started getting mail forwarded that was ticketed for my father's old address to my new address here in Coram. And again, I'm allowed to give myself the occasional pat on the back. Now, this is nursery school level stuff, but it's something that has to be done. Unbeknownst to me, there was something really important just outside of my range of the tunnel vision that I live my life through. So I was driving about a month ago, a little less than a month ago. I was on the South Shore, I think. I wasn't quite on the South Shore. I was sort of in that area where Comac is almost into Bayshore. Like Comac is just ridiculously, it's a sprawling town. As is Huntington, as is my old hometown in Massapequa. But Comac goes further south than I thought. Anyway, I am driving, not far from Comac. I do whatever I'm doing, the drop off. And all of a sudden there's, boo, there's a cop car behind me. I pull over. And of course, a million thoughts are running through my head. I'm trying to remember the last time I got pulled over. It's one thing to go through a dragnet where if there's, as I say, registration issue, inspection, busted taillight, whatever it might be, I mean, shit happens. But the last time I got pulled over, it was 2005. It's amazing that I would remember it so fast, 2005, I had just watched my sister in Henry IV, Part 2, at SUNY New Paltz. And I was starting to drive home. It was late. It was like 10 o'clock. And I knew I wasn't going to get back to Huntington until like 12:30. And a cop raced behind me just as I was about to get on the New York Thruway South to head home. And a son of a bitch pulled me over. And I knew that the car, the registration, everything was ipsy-pipsy. So I stopped, and I was mad. I knew there was no reason for me to be pulled over. And so when I put the window down, and the officer leaned in, he says, "Okay, you're fine." What? He says, No. We do these random DUI stops. Oh, okay. Well, that made sense. That immediately calmed me down. Because I'm like, it's fucking 10 o'clock, and I'm trying to, I got a 2.5 hour drive. You pulled me over for, okay. You want to make sure nobody's getting onto the, all right, officer. I didn't apologize to him, but I calmed down. I'm glad I didn't start yelling. I could have given myself more trouble. Imagine going to jail or getting arrested because you curse out a cop. What the fuck you pull? No. But that was the last time that I got pulled over. 2005. So I'm sitting just off of Comac Road in one of the kind of side streets. And I am trying to figure out why would he be pulling me over? My registration is fine. It's good to September 24th. Why would my license plate have pinged? This is what I'm thinking. I would assume that you would be thinking similar things. How could I possibly? I don't have any outstanding warrants or priors. I don't have 200 unpaid parking tickets. I don't have any. So I am stunned. So the cop comes up to the car and he says, "You're probably wondering why I pulled you over." And by the way, he was very, very cordial, very nice. I should point that out. He didn't have an attitude or an axe to grind or anything like that. He was very cordial. And again, I put my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't want there to be any kind of wackiness or, heaven forbid, some kind of confrontation. He said, the reason why I pulled you over is your insurance expired. What? I was the most surprised person in Comac at that moment. I was beyond flabbergasted. My insurance had expired at the end of May. Under normal circumstances, I had been getting, not emails, I had been getting regular mail from Geico because I would pay the bill once a year. Yeah, if you can't do it that way, you pay once a month. But you see, now I understand that paying monthly and doing a bank draw rather than how I was doing it, which was that I was paying it, I set myself up for a potential problem. And I didn't think of it that way because why would I think of it that way? It hadn't happened, right? So Geico had been sending the regular mails, as they always did, to my apartment address, which I did not have forwarded. And I hadn't been there in how many months? Because in my head, I wasn't getting any real mail over there anymore. The important mails were being correctly forwarded. So as I sat there scratching my head, and I was really angry, I was mad at myself for allowing this to happen. But at the other hand, I know that I was not alerted to it. It was just an unfortunate, lemony snicket, unfortunate sequence of events here. So the cop basically gave me what is called a uniform ticket. It's ridiculous, but he didn't have any idea with the inspection. But what he said was, the way that we have to do this ticket is, it's as if because your registration was suspended after May 30th or 31st, all of this other stuff goes with the ticket. And then he said, if you want to drive this car, you're going to have to go to the DMV. And unfortunately, you're going to have to actually go to court unless you have an attorney that can represent you. But you're going to have to go to court because this is, as misdemeanors go. Whoa, misdemeanor? This is not a traffic violation? What? So this uniform ticket was like this. It was yay big. 6 different citations. But the key one was not even driving without insurance. The driving without insurance on its own is a traffic violation. But the driving without insurance, which I didn't know about, stupidly, it automatically triggers a suspension of the registration. And that was the misdemeanor. So I went home. I was really pissed off. I went to DMV the next day. And, how do I unsuspend this? What do I do? They said, well, you have 2 choices. If you want to drive this car, that is. You can allow the suspension now that you've gotten insurance and you've taken care of that, because that was what triggered the suspension. You can pay a fine, or you can just let however much time elapse and then you're okay to drive. However many days that it had popped, whatever, it's all this nonsense, but you understand what I'm saying. So my mom decided she wanted to buy the car because in Florida, they don't have any inspection. There is no emissions. You can pollute all you want in good old sunny Florida. They don't care. Hey, no judgment, right? This is the Planet Fitness of podcast, judgment-free zones. I wish that New York had not had emissions but in this instance, I was getting pulled over anyway. And I'm glad that the officer was so cordial and gracious, and he probably could have added another 2 or 3 to the uniform ticket. Now, I start Googling this particular misdemeanor, which I shouldn't have done. It's like when you have a cough and you Google your symptoms. In most cases, you feel like you've got 48 hours to live, and you know what? I had a good run. I made it to 50, and I'm dead. Well, me Googling this particular offense, misdemeanor, in the immortal words of Robert Klein, it could be nothing, maybe a $50 fine, but if the judge is in a bad mood, consecutive life sentences, no chance for parole or visitors. So I start freaking out. And I'm waiting, the court date is approaching. I don't know how this is going to go, what's going to happen. So I contact an attorney who specializes in traffic violations. She's quite successful. She has offices not far from here, Port Jeff, and also near traffic court in Hempstead, close to Nassau Coliseum for reference. And she doesn't tell me what I want to hear. She says, well, you're going to Suffolk, which is good. They're usually much more lenient in Suffolk. But people don't understand. This is a potentially serious offense, Mr. Cohen, punishable by up to a year in prison. I'm fucking panicking. Oh, what the fuck, man? If Geico, if I had just gotten an email from Geico, they didn't even email my dad's email address. I don't know how that's possible. I get random text messages from Geico. Why didn't I get a random text message? It made no sense, but I couldn't do anything about that. The attorney, without charging me, God bless, right? She gave me She told me what I needed to do. She said, listen, you're not going to go to prison, Mr. Cohen, okay? But here's what you do. And if you do this right, I'm telling you, you won't get more than a $100 fine. And it won't go on your license. Here's what you do. So she laid it out for me. She said, you say that you're selling the car to your mother anyway. She's in Florida. You go through the process, return the plates, and make sure you have the surrender receipt. And if you go to court with that information, it shows you're taking this seriously. And at worst, maybe you'll get a $100 fine. So talking to her, although she freaked me out with what she opened the conversation with, when she laid out the most likely nuts and bolts reality, I felt a lot better. So I did what she said. Took the plates off, put the car in the garage, and let's just see what happens in court. Now, here is the other thing with the story. I referenced my father. When I got to DMV, they were as surprised as I was to find that the title of the car was still in my dad's name. We attempted to execute a switch of the title into my name in 2021, just after Dad's accident. As far as both of us knew, that switch of title had gone off smoothly, but apparently it hadn't. Now, this is the sort of thing, if we're in a movie, it feels like extraneous narrative information. It's not really that important. Well, what the hell's the difference? Whose name is on the title? The guy was driving without insurance. It triggered a registration suspension of this car's registration. Is this guy allowed to drive? All of this bullshit. Well, by me getting insurance, they told me, no, your license is fine. It's clear. So I went to court. It was last week. And boy, there were a lot of people there. There were a lot of people there. And they have it, it's almost like gambling. Like you have these big TV terminals and it lists your name and, 15 misdemeanors, one misdemeanor. You got to go to this court, then that court, and then here. And you're going to be better prepared to come back for another date, all of this. So I go to the appropriate courtroom and there's a guy, I guess he was kind of like a public defender. He said, listen, if you don't have an attorney with you, everybody here, if they have nothing worse than a misdemeanor traffic violation, a uniform ticket with one misdemeanor, which was me, you're all going to plead not guilty. And then he said something where I started laughing, and I don't know if I was supposed to. He said, you're all going to plead not guilty. The judge is going on vacation, and she wants to be out of here by noon. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. And I said, oh, well, that sounds great. So we get into court, and I'm still like, what the fuck? The judge wants to get out of here, but what is that? Fine. Probably to my benefit. So person goes up, they pay a small fine, and I calculate their offense was a lot worse than mine. My offense was ignorance, blah, blah, blah. I get up, they call, Mr. Cohen, come on up. Yeah. So I go next to the public defender guy, and he leans over, and he says, they're dismissing all the charges. You should have said something. The title of the car wasn't in your name. How can you be held responsible for this? I looked at the guy, and I covered my mouth because, again, I started laughing. It seemed to be a disaster. At the DMV, we're like, oh my God, the car is not in your name, Mr. Cohen. What are we going to do? Oh. Case dismissed. Uniform ticket thrown out. No fine, nothing. The fuck up of the car not transferring properly, when the prosecution team looked at it, they said, what are we charging this guy with? It's not his car. Dismissed. Thanks for your time, Judge. Much obliged. Mr. Cohen, you're dismissed. You're free to go. And that's it. I fucked up. It's not a mistake that will ever happen again. Got away with it. But you see, if you want to take a lesson from this, don't plead guilty to anything traffic related. Don't pay fines. Have your day in court, as painful as it might be. If I had been able to pay each of those tickets in advance to avoid going to court, I would have done it. It might have been $500, $600, $700. Instead, I showed my face, and it was nothing. It was all dismissed. Mom's still getting the car. The car's still not going to pass inspection. I don't even think there's a moral of the story. Do a bank draw on insurance to make sure that your insurance doesn't pop, because I got lucky here. This could have been a lot worse all around. Also, if the police officer had been having a bad day, he pointed out, and he kind of indicated that he doesn't really do this. He said, I could impound your car. Now you're getting into a whole other level of bad. Thank goodness he did not choose to impound the car. He just sent me home. He said, just go home, Mr. Cohen. Please drive safe, and please take care of this tomorrow so you don't have to worry and other people don't need to worry. It's for everybody's sake. No, you're right, officer. I'm sorry. My first experience in traffic court. My first experience at Cohalan Court Complex in Central Islip. As a defendant, my first experience, period, on the defendant's side of the table. This has been episode number 245 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this absurd, admittedly ridiculous, but very true life tale of woe. Hopefully you had a few chuckles herein. But if you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platform such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. Peace.